The memory of the bus that never returned. Morning Lake. 1986. On a May morning in 1986, in the quiet town of Halstead, 15 children from Class 6B of Halstead Ridge Elementary School eagerly boarded a yellow school bus for their final field trip of the school year, bound for Morning Lake, a beloved summer camp known for its fragrant pine forests, crystal clear waters, and newly built wooden cabins. They carried lunchboxes, disposable cameras, cartoon-themed backpacks, and an excitement they couldn't hide. The trip promised 2 days filled with sunshine and laughter, a well-earned reward after a long school year. But no one could have predicted what happened next. The bus, along with the 15 children and the driver, vanished without a trace. No crash, no distress signal, not even a tire mark left behind. Only an eerie silence, as if none of them had ever existed. The bus never arrived at Morning Lake. No one saw it pass the gas station. No security camera captured it crossing the main intersection. It was as if it had turned down a road that didn't exist, not on any map, but within reality itself. And from that moment on, no one ever saw or heard from any of them again. The incident quickly became the focus of a media firestorm, triggering the largest search effort in Halstead County history. Search teams scoured the pine forest for weeks. Divers combed every corner of Morning Lake. Helicopters swept overhead while sniffer dogs sniffed every stone and bush. But as the sweltering summer of 1986 wore on, all that remained were patches of upturned earth and a cold void in the police files marked no traces, no bodies, no evidence of foul play. And there was one person who never forgot, not for a single day in the 39 years that followed. Lana Whitaker, just 11 years old at the time, had been bedridden with chickenpox, fevered, and itchy in her small bedroom. She had cried bitterly when her mother called the school to excuse her absence, a morning she would never forget, because it had saved her life. When she heard her classmates had gone missing, Lana couldn't decide what chilled her more, the fear or the guilt of still being alive. Through her teenage years, Lana held on to a class photo, a red headband once forgotten in a planing desk by Nora Kelly, and a handwritten list of her 15 classmates. She marked their names with her own symbols, not to categorize them, but to remember their laughs, their runs, their quirks. To others, the story faded into a dark chapter in the town's past. But for Lana, it remained an unhealed wound. More than 3 decades later, she became the deputy sheriff of Halstead County, not out of family tradition, but because of a quiet vow she once made to herself. If anyone ever came back, she would be the first to know. If any truth was buried, she would be the one to uncover it. The townspeople no longer spoke of Morning Lake. The sign pointing to the camp had rusted away, the old trails swallowed by the forest, and memories faded into the thick fog of each morning. But to Lana, everything remained vivid. Each time a yellow school bus rolled past her office window, her heart clenched. Each time she heard a child's laugh, she imagined Nora, Caleb, Kimmy, names forever frozen at age 11. And then, on a May morning in 2025, the police phone rang. A team of construction workers, digging a sanitation tunnel near the edge of the Morning Lake forest, had found something strange underground. A large metallic object, painted yellow, buried deep for decades. On its license plate, faded characters just clear enough to match old records. The bus had come back. No engine, no rolling wheels. Just a rusted shape rising from the soil like a forgotten mass, grave, unearthed by time. And standing before it in the morning mist, Lana Whitaker felt herself once again become the fevered little girl, still marked by chickenpox, still burdened with an unnamed dread. But this time, she would not look away. This time she would follow that bus to the very end. The silent witness. When the bus returned from the earth, nearly 40 years after the yellow school bus carrying 15 children and a driver vanished, without a trace, Morning Lake remained shrouded in a dense fog, one that clung not only to the ancient pine trunks, but also to the collective memory of an entire town. In that place, silence had lasted far too long. People learned not to speak of the past. The old sign pointing toward the summer camp had been swallowed by vines. Class photos faded away and dusty. Albums. And the bus? It might as well have never existed. Until the morning of May 5, 2025. The report came in before daylight. A construction crew digging a sewer tunnel near the edge of the Morning Lake forest. Abandoned since the 1992nd. Had uncovered a large, metallic object buried deep underground. Its yellow paint had peeled away. The windshield was shattered, and the barely visible license number was enough to make the Halstead Police Command Center fall silent. Lana Whitaker, now the deputy sheriff, arrived just 40 minutes after the first call. Her hands still smelled of the coffee she never got to drink. Her heart pounding as if it were racing to catch up with the time stolen nearly 4 decades ago. The bus emerged from the earth like a corroded, solitary monument to a truth that had never been explained. The surrounding soil had been cleared, and though the rear of the bus was dented and caked in mud, the emergency door could still be opened. No one dared step inside. Before Lana arrived, "You'll want to be the first," said the construction foreman, removing his helmet with quiet respect. Inside the bus, there were no bodies, no human remains, no torn clothing, no evidence of anyone being harmed or held captive. But something even more terrifying than death lingered there. Absolute absence. The seats were still intact. Some seatbelts were still fastened, as if someone had once sat there, then vanished, without needing to unbuckle. On the dusty floor sat a pink lunchbox. Its lid flipped open, containing only a few crumbs and a melted, warped plastic spoon. Near the safe, rear steps was a child's shoe, covered in moss and soil. Its colors faded, but still bearing the plono image of a cartoon character from the 1982nd. Lana knelt, gloved hand, lifting the tiny shoe, her throat tightening as she read the name written in black ink. Kimmy. And at the front, where the driver should have sat, was something that shattered any remaining hope of a normal accident. A class list. The paper was written in purple ink, with feminine, slanted handwriting. The names remained: Caleb, Nora, Sam, Kimmy, Marcy. At the bottom, Miss Delaney, homeroom teacher. But something was wrong. Below the list, scrawled in crude red marker, as if meant to erase the teacher's name, were the chilling words, "We never made it to Morning Lake." It sent a cold shiver through Lana's spine. There she stood, inside the rotting shell of a bus where time had frozen like a never-ending nightmare. The message, part confession, part cry for help, was more than a fragment of memory. It was living proof that someone had been here after the world believed them gone. Someone clear-headed enough to leave a sign or a warning. Lana stepped outside. The air was thick and heavy. The wind swept through the tall trees, carrying the scent of rotting leaves and rusted metal. Birds cried overhead. Not a welcome, but a warning. "Seal off this area," she ordered, her voice like steel. "No one touches anything until the federal team arrives." She turned to the bus again, its cracked frame slowly being reclaimed by the forest. A grave with no bodies, a question with no answer. And deep within her, Lana knew this was only the beginning. Because if the bus had come back, then someone or something was about to speak after nearly 40 years of silence. The ageless returnee, Nora Kelly, and the secret of the man who must not be named. 3 days after the buried yellow school bus was discovered near Morning Lake, a violent Storm swept through Halstead, as if trying to wash away the remnants of a long-buried past. Rain poured relentlessly. Earth and stones slid down the hillsides, and in a moment no one could have foreseen, the past stepped out of the shadows. At 4:17 a.m., the police station received a strange call from a woodsman living near the edge of the forest. In the downpour, he had spotted a barefoot woman in a tattered white dress, her red hair soaked and clinging to her face, standing motionless by the roadside just 2 miles from where the bus had been found. When asked her name, she gave a reply that chilled his blood. "I'm Nora Kelly. I went on a field trip with my class. We never made it to the lake." Lana Whitaker, now the lead federal investigator, arrived in under an hour. When she entered the interrogation room, where the woman sat curled up like an abandoned child, Lana felt it in her gut. This was no imposter. The woman appeared to be in her early 30s, but her wide, frightened eyes belonged to a child. In her arms, she clutched a ragged cloth doll, its fabric smeared with mud, with a name stitched in red thread. Annie. Whenever anyone came near, she pulled the doll tightly to her chest, as if it were the only lifeline keeping her afloat in an invisible sea. "My name is Nora Kelly," she whispered, her voice cracking. "I'm 12 years old. Today is Friday. Miss Delaney said we were going on a field trip, but Mr. Avery said no." Lana sat down across from her without pushing. She placed a faded class photo from 1986 on the table. The words Class 6B, Halstead Elementary, barely visible. Nora stared at it, her hand trembling as she pointed to a red-haired girl with glasses, second row from the left. "I remember that day," Nora said. "We were singing on the bus. Kimmy had a pink unicorn lunchbox. Caleb was reading a comic book. But then the bus didn't go to Morning Lake. It turned down a road with no name." She looked up, her voice barely audible. "Mr. Avery was driving, but he wasn't the real driver." The room fell silent. Mr. Avery, a name never once mentioned in any report. No record of such a person in DOT, school employment files, substitute rosters, or transportation contracts from 1986. But Nora was insistent. It was him who drove the bus off course. "He didn't let us use real names," Nora said, eyes distant as if looking through time. "In that place, names were dangerous. If I called myself Nora, he would take me to the remembering room." "The remembering room?" Lana asked. Nora nodded, her arm moving as if on instinct, pulling up her sleeve to reveal faint lines along her skin, as if someone had carved words into her memory. Each mark was a scar, a nightmare etched in flesh. "It's where they shaped us," Nora whispered. "They taught us to listen without reacting, to answer without thinking, to forget our names and remember only his." "Who is he?" Lana asked again. Nora just shook her head. "We're not allowed to say. They told us if we ever spoke his true name, actually said it, we'd never leave. No one ever leaves. No one ever grows up. Only I escaped." When the medical team examined Nora, they discovered something bizarre. Biologically, she appeared around 30 years old. But neurologically and developmentally, her brain matched that of a preteen. No records of her existing in any modern system. No ID, no phone, no medical history past 1986. And then, for a brief moment, clarity struck her. Nora gripped Lana's hand and whispered, "There are still children down there, in the place they call below the memorial room. I escaped, but I brought the memories with me. I'm the system's mistake." That same night, while Nora slept, investigators reopened every record connected to Halstead from 1986. They searched for anyone with the name or alias Avery. Nothing turned up, but inside an old personnel file, buried deep in an unmarked folder, They found a torn scrap of paper, handwritten in rough ink. No one may speak real names. What has a name can return. What is forgotten stays forever. Unearthing moldy records. Lana's investigation. And the mystery of the nameless ones. In the basement of Halstead City Hall, where time had settled thick as dust upon brittle, brown file folders, Lana Whitaker, the sole survivor of Class 6B in 1986, sat alone at a cold metal table. She couldn't recall exactly why she had returned to this place. Perhaps it was the haunted look in Nora Kelly's eyes, or perhaps it was that chilling whisper, like a voice, echoing from the void. We never made it to the lake. The archive room was eerily silent, save for the slow, steady tick of an old wall clock, like the heartbeat of something long forgotten. Lana flipped through files labeled 06-1986, Halstead Elementary School, Morning Lake, Trip, Mass Disappearance. Each name surfaced like a ghost awakened from sleep. Amy Tran, Caleb Morris, Michael Reed, Kimberly Fay. Every one of them had once smiled. In a class photo, and after the 2nd of June, 1986, not a single one was ever seen again. One document made Lana pause. The original investigation report. The faded italicized text read, Driver, Carl Davis, male, 42. Contracted from Midwest Transport. Note, did not return. Reported missing by family 24 hours after the event. Bus not recovered. She quickly turned to Carl Davis's personnel file. A man with a thick mustache and tired, eyes staring blankly into the ID photo lens. Something about his expression made Lana's spine stiffen. A handwritten report from his wife caught her eye. Carl said a woman called the night before the trip, said the next day's drive would open a door. He was confused, but he went anyway. I haven't seen him since that morning. A woman, Lana thought. She turned back to the old class photo, the one she'd carried in her wallet for years. In the bottom row, far right corner, was an unfamiliar face. The substitute teacher from that day. Miss Atwell. No one in the class had known who she really was. She arrived just a week before the trip, filling in for Miss Delaney, who had broken her leg in a sudden accident. Lana remembered the uneasy feeling she'd had the first time she saw Miss Atwell. Too young, too emotionless, eyes that never blinked. She wore a long black dress and spoke in a monotone voice, as if every lesson had been pre-recorded. Lana typed Miss Atwell, Halstead 1986, into the Minnesota State Residency database. No results. She tried variations. Atwell, Atwelli Atwill. Still nothing. Not a single person by that name had ever been registered in Halstead or the entire county. She opened the personnel files of the now defunct Halstead Elementary School. A blurry application form surfaced, written in black ink. E. Atwell, substitute teacher. Recommendation, Dr. F. Reynolds. Lana narrowed her eyes. Dr. F. Reynolds. That name wasn't unfamiliar. He had been one of the school's psychological counselors at the time, the same man who once advised Lana to take time off after the disappearance due to prolonged emotional shock. She dug up his records. The paperwork stated, retired September 1986. Disappeared from residence 1 month later. No note. No signs of travel. The picture was forming. A contracted bus driver who never returned. A teacher who left no trace in any government record. A school counselor who vanished without explanation. And the children, including Lana herself, who were once guided by people who may never have truly belonged in Halstead at all. Then Lana found one final note in the file, a line that froze her blood. One student absent that day, Lana Whitaker, reported sudden illness. No prior symptoms. No medical file. She went still. She hadn't been sick. She remembered that morning vividly. Her mother had told her the CSS field trip was canceled. that the school had sent a notice changing the schedule. But Lana had never confirmed that with the school. And her mother? She died of a stroke in 2009, taking unspoken truths to the grave. Lana closed her eyes. In the darkness of memory, she felt someone place a hand on her shoulder. A low voice murmured, "You shouldn't have spoken your true name." She jolted awake, heart racing, sweat beading on her forehead. There was no one in the archive room, but the chill in her bones whispered what she already feared. The past had never truly gone to sleep, and she, the only survivor, may have never actually escaped that bus at all. The first clues: a crack in the sealed door. Obedience is safety, memory is danger. That phrase had etched itself into Nora Kelly's mind like a broken chorus, echoing from the place she once called sanctuary, a shelter, or more truthfully, a prison without bars. In the initial interviews, Nora was an enigma, half-human, half-distorted memory blurred by time and years of unconventional confinement. But the fragments of her testimony slowly began to align into a dark picture, revealing the first crack in a door that had been shut for nearly 4 decades. Nora referred to the place where she had been held as sanctuary, a facility deep underground, without windows, without natural light. Every child there was given the same uniform, each bearing a name that wasn't theirs. Nora was no longer Nora. She was called Clarity, the child who must see without asking, hear without thinking. We weren't allowed to mention Morning Lake, weren't allowed to use our old names. If anyone slipped up, they were sent to the adjustment room. "What's the adjustment room?" Lana asked. Nora looked down at her hands, fingernails grazing her skin, a habit she had never shaken since being there. "It's where they erased your memories. They called it the cleaning room. There were white lights, loudspeakers playing lessons, and someone who always stood behind you. You never saw their face." Nora's accounts bore eerie similarities to known brainwashing and reprogramming methods, from Black Ops rehabilitation programs uncovered in the 1962nd and 72nd, many linked to the CIA. But this was worse. The target was children. "We were taught one thing above all else," Nora said, eyes gazing into the distance. "Obedience is safety. Memory is danger." The slogan was plastered on every door, repeated during breakfast recitations, etched into plastic bowls, and posted above each sleeping cot. Every day was a test, not of knowledge, but of how well you could forget who you were. But not every child forgot. Kimmy Lung was one of them. Nora remembered her, small, defiant, the only one who kept a bracelet from home despite all personal items being banned. She hid it in her shoe, Nora recalled, and every night she'd touch it before bed. It was her thread to the old world. When Lana heard the name, it hit her like a blow to the chest. Kimmy Lung, the short-haired girl with the tan skin, always clinging to her watercolor paint set. In the class photo, Kimmy stood beside Nora, their hands clasped. The following day, based on Nora's statement, the investigation expanded to an abandoned stable once owned by Frank Avery, located south of Morning Lake Forest. Nora had mentioned Mr. Avery several times. The stables had rotted into ruin, blackened by old fire damage. Yet beneath a splintered beam, something small caught the last light of day. Lana bent down and picked it up. It was caked in mud, but one wipe revealed the truth. A plastic bracelet with letter beads spelling Kimmy. Time froze. They didn't need DNA tests. Lana knew. Her instinct screamed, this was Kimmy's bracelet. It wasn't just evidence of her existence. It was an act of resistance, the final defiance of a child who refused to be erased. Who was Frank Avery? Lana demanded at the emergency briefing. The file said he was a horse rancher who died in a fire in 1991. No family, no heir. But the forensic report noted one oddity. Dental records of the remains did not match Frank Avery's known files. Yet the case was closed. Authorities concluded the victim must be Frank Avery. Who else could have lived alone in that scorched-out ruin? But Lana was no longer sure. Because if Frank Avery wasn't the victim, then maybe he faked his death to keep running Sanctuary from the shadows. And that led to a far more terrifying possibility. If Sanctuary was never abandoned, then maybe it's still operating. Kimmy Lung, the girl who returned from beneath the earth. 6 weeks after the buried bus was unearthed, and Nora Kelly had re-emerged like a ghost from the past, Lana Whitaker received an urgent call from the Federal Geological Survey team. They had been scanning for underground chambers beneath the Morning Lake area, guided by Nora's fragmented descriptions of Sanctuary. Less than a mile from Frank Avery's abandoned stables, they found a hidden underground transfer station, its name barely legible on a crude, corroded metal plaque. Transfer Station 2. The entrance was a rusted steel door buried beneath layers of earth and stone, uncovered only when equipment detected an unusual patch of cement deep in the forest. No official records to mention the site. It was as if it had never existed. Lana and a special task force pried the door open. It screeched like tortured metal, a cry from something long forgotten. A narrow iron staircase led them nearly 30 feet underground. The 48th. To that, air was unnaturally dry, thick with the scent of old disinfectant and rust. Dim fluorescent. Lights buzzed faintly overhead, shockingly, still operational. At the end of the corridor, they found a sealed room with reinforced glass. Inside lay a small girl curled up on a metal bed, clutching a tattered notebook. She looked up as the door opened. Her wide, dark eyes didn't show fear, but recognition. "Lana?" Her voice was hoarse, barely audible. "Is it really you?" The room went completely still. The medical team froze. Lights trained on the girl's face, then back to the 1986 class photo. There was no doubt. Kimmy Lung. She hadn't aged a day since that photograph. Her physical growth had somehow stalled, as if time had folded inside this hidden place. But her memory, her mind, remained razor-sharp, unnervingly sharp. "They called me Silence," Kimmy said during her first debriefing, curled under the same blanket she refused to give up. "I wasn't allowed to be Kimmy. We couldn't speak of school or our moms or anything outside the protocol. If you broke the rules, they sent you to the garden." "What's the garden?" Lana asked. Kimmy didn't answer with words. Instead, she opened the frayed leather notebook, flipping to a page marked by a red thread. In it, she had written a poem by hand, careful, almost sacred. "And the garden grows what they forget, where silence blooms and memory sets. Beneath the soil, the names are sown, so none shall find their way back home." It read like a lullaby, but each line was coded resistance in disguise. Lana realized the truth. Kimmy had written her diary in allegory, hiding memories within sacred-sounding hymns, songs the children were forced to sing each night. "They thought we weren't smart enough to remember," Kimmy said with a sad smile. "But I never forgot. My dad was a librarian. He taught me to encrypt. So I turned there, songs into maps. Every word, every syllable, is a direction." The same songs Nora had sung, unconsciously, were now decoded by Kimmy one line at a blatant time, exposing their dark truth. Silence is the seed. Obedience is the root. Memory is the weed that must be pulled. Lana couldn't look away from Kimmy, not just because of her brilliance, but because her eyes no longer held fear. Only a burning, unshakable will to survive. A fire that had never gone out. You really remember me?" Lana asked. "How did you know it was me after all?" "These years?" Kimmy nodded. "I dreamed of you, again and again. You were the only one who didn't get on the bus. You're the only memory they couldn't take. Are there any others who survived?" Kimmy clutched the notebook tighter. "I don't know. Some don't remember who they are anymore. Some call themselves joy, harmony, compliance. They're still down there, in Haven, the lowest level. But if they read my hymns, they might remember. They might find their way out." She looked directly into Lana's eyes. The problem is, there's a keeper in the garden, and he's never forgotten a single child. Maya Ellison, the one who kept the light. They found the mural in room 6, the deepest part of Transfer Station 2. The room was no different from the rest of the bunker-peeling concrete ceilings. Walls cold as stone, a rusted, single bed, and a dangling overhead bulb. But behind the heavy steel door, beneath a thick layer of dust gathered through the years, something unusual waited. A hand-painted mural. Not part of the system's iconography. Not another slogan like obedience is safety or memory is danger. This was a painting done in trembling but determined strokes, using silver blue oil paint. It showed a door slightly ajar, with a tiny glowing lamp in the darkness beyond. Above it, scrawled in uneven handwriting, Cassia remembered. She left the light on for us. Lana stood in silence before the mural for a long time. After weeks of investigation, she'd begun to believe that all the children were either programmed to forget or imprisoned until they disappeared from collective memory. But Cassia, that name had never appeared on any list. There was no Cassia in Class 6B, no record of a missing child named Cassia. And yet, clearly, Cassia had been one of them, and she had gotten out. Lana ran the handwriting through the archival system and found a partial match, a 1991 handwritten letter sent anonymously to the Halstead School District. The letter read, "I lived in a place without memory. I didn't know my name until I gave myself one. I chose Cassia because it was the first name I knew was mine. There are still children there. I left a sign, a small light, hoping someday, someone would find it." The letter had never been answered. No return address, but the postmark on the envelope pointed to Ellison's Books, an old bookstore downtown. Lana didn't need more proof. That afternoon she stepped into the narrow shop tucked between two vintage clothing stores. The doorbell chimed softly, like a familiar tune. Behind the counter stood a woman in her mid-40s, with soft curls and gray-blue eyes. She smiled politely, until Lana handed her the photo of the mural with the words Cassia remembered. The smile vanished. "You're Cassia, aren't you?" Lana asked. Silence. The woman looked around the store, as if checking for listening ears. Then she drew a curtain behind the counter and motioned Lana into a small back room, lined with old books, papers, and a sturdy oak desk. On the desk sat a blue notebook, identical to the one Nora carried. But here, it was not hidden. "Cassia's the name I chose," she said softly. "I don't remember my real name. They erased it. Erased everything. But I held on to one thing, an awareness that I used to be someone else." Her current name was Maya Ellison. She said she had escaped sanctuary in 1990 during a power outage. As she fled through room 6, she saw a drawing of a lamp in a children's book and decided to recreate it first with blood and charcoal, then covering it with paint once I found a way out. I wasn't sure anyone would ever see it, but I hoped. Lana cut in. Kimmy saw it. And Nora remembers too. Maya froze. Her hands trembled. "Nora is alive?" Lana nodded. "And you're the only one who didn't forget entirely." Maya broke down in tears. She told Lana that after escaping, she built a quiet, life-forging documents, changing her name, opening the bookstore. Hidden in old children's books, she left traces, folded papers, drawings, library cards, each one a message for the nameless children, should any of them ever find their way out. "I've always believed that memory is the only way to keep your identity," Maya said. "They can force us to forget, but if even one person, just one, remembers, the door isn't shut forever." As Lana left the bookstore, the Halstead sky had darkened, but in her hands she carried something brighter than any light. Cassia's original journal, The first encoded record of sanctuary, garden, and haven, the layered hell designed to consume childhood itself. And now, the one who had once kept the light burning for others had stepped back into the brangus, the world to help Lana ignite it again. Truth revealed, the reprogrammed children. There was one thing Cassia, now known as Maya Ellison, had always believed. Even in her darkest days, that memory was the key. And light was a message for those who knew how to see. For 30 years, she had lived as an ordinary woman, a modest bookstore owner, reading poetry to children, occasionally teaching classic literature at the Halstead Town Center. But in truth, she was the first and only survivor who had kept her memories intact. When Lana and Maya sat together for the first time in the bookstore's basement, surrounded by notebooks, hand-drawn maps, and decades of self-gathered files, the truth began to emerge, not in an explosion, but like a flashlight sweeping slowly through the dark. Sanctuary is only the surface, Maya began, her fingers lightly brushing over a faded pencil sketch of the underground structure. Below it is a deeper, tiered system. They call it the root complex. Inside, there are zones with specific names: sanctuary, haven, garden, each one a stage in the programming process. She pointed to a small rectangle near the center of the map. Garden. This is the worst of them all. Children were taken here when they resisted, when they refused to forget. Lana frowned. I thought garden was supposed to be a reward, a better place. Maya shook her head. Number. It's the final path. There, they aren't punished. They're put to sleep. White light, gentle singing. And then, each memory is peeled away, so softly they don't even realize. It's gone. And after that, if they stay empty long enough, some are sent back to the surface. But not as themselves anymore. She laid an old file on the table, its pages yellowed with age. Case file number 47. Subject: H. Morris. H. Morris was a student in 1986. After 12 years missing, he suddenly appeared in rural Iowa, with a new name, new memories, no recollection of Halstead. And accountant, married, absolutely normal. And he never knew who he really was. Not a single memory, Maya whispered, except once. When his daughter asked, "Dad, were you ever Caleb Morris?" A name she had seen in an old newspaper. He panicked, locked himself in a room for 3 days, and then forgot again. A chill ran down Lana's spine. She remembered Caleb, the blonde boy who loved drawing superheroes and once said he'd become an animator. And now, if Caleb was still alive, somewhere he was no longer Caleb. So how did they control them so completely? Lana asked, eyes fixed on the map. This wasn't just physical torture, they went further. Maya nodded. They didn't just make us forget. They rewrote us. They used suggestion, repetition, reinforcement. Every child was given a new name: silence, clarity, joy, obedience. No, one was allowed to keep their real name, because your name is the last link to who you were. She placed a thin black notebook on the table, gently opening it to the first page. Carefully, handwritten inside, "If I die, I want to be called Cassia. I want people to know I had memories, that I used to be someone, and I left the light on for the others." This was my journal while I was in garden, Maya said, eyes glistening. I kept it buried under my pillow every night. They never found it. I don't know why I survived. Maybe I was a good actor. Maybe garden couldn't digest me. But when I left, I knew I couldn't take anyone with me. All I could do was leave behind a light. Lana nodded slowly. Now she understood the hymns that Nora and Kimmy sang. They were codes, passing information through song. She understood why the mural in room 6 showed a lamp. It was a signal, hope encoded against the forgetting. And she realized she had stumbled into an elaborate system, not one that killed children, but erased them entirely, through memory reprogramming. through identity reconstruction, by killing their names. Maya looked at Lana one last time that day and spoke a sentence Lana would carry with her for the rest of her life. No one truly disappears as long as someone remembers their name. But if no one does, then they don't need to kill us. They only need to rewrite us. From the beginning, Aaron Devlin, the one who chose to stay. His name had been erased from every record. On the list of missing children from 1986, Aaron Devlin was just a final, faint entry taped over in a faded file, with no photograph, no parent info, no description. Many believed he never got on the bus that day, or that he was simply a shadow lost in a sea of other names. But the truth was, Aaron never left the system, because he chose to stay. Lana first encountered his name, hidden in a cipher embedded within the final page of Maya's journal, the one who watched from within. He carried order, and chose silence over escape. He remembers everything, but speaks only when the time is ready. The man who lived in a wooden cabin at the northern edge of Halstead was almost entirely cut off from the world. No relatives, a sparse bank account, no medical records of note, no social security number before 1995. A legal ghost. But when Lana stepped into that cabin, filled with old books, maps pinned to the walls, and a silent radio beside a chipped teapot, she knew she had found the right person. Aaron opened the door when she called him by his real name. His eyes gray-blue and weary showed no surprise. He didn't ask why she had come. He simply stepped aside and said, "I suppose it's time." They sat at a wooden table, the lamplight casting long shadows on the walls that bore hand-drawn maps of the underground system, redrawn over decades by Aaron himself. "You remember it all?" Lana asked. Aaron nodded. "I never forgot. That's the reward and the punishment." He explained that as an one-year-old boy inside Sanctuary, he had been given a choice: maintain order instead of being reprocessed. Not because he was obedient, but because he was observant. They trained him as an intermediary, a go-between for the staff and the other children. His job was to monitor, take attendance, and report any signs of defiance. At first, I believed I was helping them stay safe. I believed their mantra: obedience is safety. But then I started seeing the ones who vanished, the ones who never came back from garden. And I began to remember my real name. Aaron admitted he had one chance to escape. In 1993, when a structural shift during a minor earthquake temporarily opened a maintenance route at Transfer Station 2. But he didn't take it. I knew if I left, there'd be no one left behind who knew every level, every tunnel. No, one who could lead someone like you to the final place. "Haven?" Lana asked. Aaron nodded. "Haven is where the successful children are kept. Those who were too obedient, too easily programmed, too hollow to cause trouble. They don't erase memory in Haven. They fill it with new identities, new roles, new futures." Lana clenched her fists. "So you're saying a lot of the children might still be alive, but have no idea who they once were?" "Not might," Aaron replied. "They are." He stood, pulled a small wooden box from beneath the table, and revealed a hand-drawn map, aged and dust-covered. Red ink marked a clear path from Transfer Station to a separate chamber buried deeper than anything previously discovered. Haven. "The only functioning entrance," Aaron said, pointing, "is through emergency shaft Y6, underneath the old wastewater facility. It's been abandoned for years. From there, go down 2 levels. You'll find a door made of alloy marked with the code 17JUN86. That's the program's start date." Lana took furious notes, her mind spinning. She had once thought Sanctuary was the end, but it was only a fade. And Haven, where the children weren't broken but rebuilt, was the core. Before leaving, she asked, "Will you come with me?" Aaron looked at her for a long time, then shook his head. I've lived 2 lives, one inside, one out. I don't have the strength to see the children I couldn't save. But I can show the way. You go. And if you ever need me one last time, turn your radio to frequency 10.2. I'll be listening. Lana left the cabin at dawn, the morning mist still hanging in the air. In her coat pocket was the map to Haven, the final piece of the puzzle. She knew what lay beneath wouldn't just be the truth, but the remnants of a program that experimented on human identity. A place where children weren't killed, but rewritten from scratch. And Aaron, the one who chose to stay, had guarded the door, waiting for the right person to knock. Final discovery. The doors that never closed. It was day 173 since the bus was unearthed beneath Morning Lake Forest. Winter had blanketed the town of Halstead like a heavy quilt, but far underground, deeper than Sanctuary's lowest basement, where sunlight had never reached, the final truth rose like a palta. Sunken ship awakened. Lana, leading a federal task force, followed Aaron Devlin's directions to a hidden entrance beneath the abandoned wastewater system. There, behind a crumbling concrete wall and a tangle of rusted utility pipes, they found it. A nameless alloy door, marked only with a quiet code, 17Jun86. When the heavy door creaked open, the air rushed out thick with chemical decay, dampness, and the electric tang of ozone. It was like stepping into a long-abandoned memory engine. Inside was Haven, the deepest layer of the underground complex, and every trace within suggested this was no prison. It was a laboratory of identity. Each room was labeled not with names, but codes. Unit S, 14 silence. Unit C, 02 compliance. Unit H, 08 harmony. There were no beds, only chairs, monochrome monitors, audio-visual devices that looped carefully designed lessons. You are not what you were. You are what we made you. Memory divides. Unity binds. Cassia is a breach. Silence must be restored. Lana stood frozen before the flickering monitors, some still sputtering with dim static. Many tapes had degraded, but a few recordings were still audible read. Not by adult voices, but by children. As if the children themselves had been made to recite scripts designed to overwrite their minds. She shivered as she entered Unit J17, the only room marked with something different. A hand-drawn silver star, nearly rubbed away. On the wall were faint blue handprints, child-sized, and taped to a wooden board in the center of the room was a laminated sheet of paper. If you're reading this, Cassia kept the door open. Bring them home. Cassia. Maya. The light keeper. Lana felt the desperation that had driven Maya, then still Cassia, to leave behind symbols in each room, to hide coded songs, to resist the system that had reprogrammed every friend she ever had. On the deepest level, the team discovered a room that was never completed, still filled with construction tools, schematics, and a whiteboard bearing one final red scrawl. Count sufficient. 73. Next transfer station. Arcadia, the 29th of July. Lana's breath caught. Arcadia. She'd heard of it. A pilot educational facility in Oregon. Opened in 1993. Accepting children with no known relatives or missing records. All reports praised its advanced training, model as efficient, obedient, yielding, and highly compliant. She suddenly remembered what Kimmy had once said. Not all of us were locked up. Some of us were chosen to continue. It was possible, no, certain, that the most obedient children, the most empty, weren't left behind. They had been relocated, rebuilt, rebranded, turned into products, perfect, controlled, and with no memory of who they once were. As the team returned to the surface, they recovered hundreds of files, brainwave maps, psychological assessments, neural overwrite reports. Many children who had once been reduced to code numbers were finally identified, but there remained a chilling list, labeled Unassigned subjects, the ones still missing, the ones never found. Cassia had been right. She kept the door open. But that door didn't only lead out. It revealed a tunnel. And the tunnel had spread. As Lana stepped out of Haven that day, she carried a folded piece of paper, found in the coat, pocket inside Unit 005. The paper was yellowed, handwritten in pencil, barely legible. My name is Caleb. If you find this, I don't remember my face, but I remember my sister's. Name was Annie. Please tell my mom I tried to remember. Lana looked up at the gray sky. There was no sun. But somewhere, deep in the soil, deep in the forgotten memories, Cassia had left a light on. And now, Lana knew her mission was no longer to investigate. It was to find every child whose name had been erased from the world, because the children not found might still be out there, living under another name, another life, while their real memories still waited in the dark for someone to turn the light back on. Ending in hope. The Morning Lake 15. When the final underground doors were opened, and the old lessons no longer echoed through the dark corridors of Haven, Lana Whitaker knew her lifelong journey had finally reached a pause, but not an end. She sat alone in the brightly lit room of Halstead Town Hall, in front of a computer screen, her fingers gently resting on the keyboard. The title appeared, letter by letter, like an old scar, stitched back together with belief. The Morning Lake 15, A Case Reopened, by Lana Whitaker. In the nearly 400-page report, Lana compiled everything she and the task force, along with the survivors, had uncovered. From the buried bus of 1986 to the underground levels of Sanctuary and Haven, and finally, the evidence showing that the children whose names were once erased could be found, restored, and called by their real names again. The document wasn't just for the FBI. It was for the families who had waited nearly 4 decades. For the children once labeled silence, obedience, or clarity, so they'd know they were never forgotten. A week later, during a memorial ceremony at the town square of Halstead, a place where no one had once dared speak of the missing children, Kimmy Lung stood in silence before a newly erected monument. Etched into it were 15 names, restored in full for the first time. After 39 years, Amy Tran, Caleb Morris, Michael Reed, Nora Kelly, Kimberly Lung, Aaron Devlin. She placed a small wreath, hand-woven from white daisies and dandelions, flowers Cassia once drew in her journal to symbolize surviving memory. Kimmy chose to stay in Halstead, not because of the past, but because she wanted to protect those memories from ever being lost again. Every weekend, she hosted a reverse hymn reading, where children were encouraged to write their true stories. No codes, no secrets. Write your real name, she told a 10-year-old girl during the first session. That's where every story begins again. On the other side of the country, in Seattle, Nora Kelly lived a quieter life. She rented a small, third-floor apartment where the afternoon light streamed through a wide window, and she began to paint. Nora's art resembled nothing anyone had ever seen. Endless hallways, faceless figures, and half-open doors. Many who saw her paintings would ask, "What are you painting?" She would simply reply, "Places I was held." Then, with a small smile, "And places I escaped." Nora rarely spoke of the past, but she sent Lana a handwritten letter along with a painting, a single glowing lantern deep in a forest. It resembled the mural from Room 6 years ago. "Thank you for not turning off that light. Because of you, I found my way back to myself." And then there was Maya Ellison, once known as Cassia, who began a new journey. Healing. Her bookstore in Halstead now had a new space in the back, no longer for storing old files or secret maps, but a workshop for children who had been hurt. She taught them poetry, journaling, and how to draw memory maps, places where the kids were free to name everything in their own words. "No one gets to rewrite you," she said at the opening. "You are the ones who get to tell your story." A child raised their hand and asked, "Did you ever lose your name?" Maya looked at the child for a long time, then gently answered, Yes, but someone called it back to me. And because of that, I found my way home. And then there was Aaron, the one who stayed behind, once the system's gatekeeper now, stepping outside it to seek the rest of the truth. No one knew exactly where Aaron went, only that he left a small note for Lana. Some names aren't in Haven. They were moved, just like the Arcadia record said. I'm going to follow that trail. When I find someone, I'll turn on a light. On a late autumn night, Lana closed the file titled The Morning Lake 15. Outside, the wind howled through the trees. But in her small study, the light remained on, not because she feared the dark, but because she knew, somewhere out there, children were still trying to find their way back. And in this world, sometimes, just one light is enough to lead them home. Final message. The children who never disappeared. Not every missing child is gone. There are children like Kimmy Lung, who carried distorted memories, once called by a name that wasn't hers, once taught to believe that memory was dangerous. But she survived and chose to stay in Halstead, not to run from the past, but to face it. With quiet courage and kindness, she works each day in the town's small library, writing calligraphy for forgotten names. And when someone asks about the years she was locked away beneath Haven, she doesn't flinch. She speaks of them like one waking from a nightmare, painful, but real. There are people like Nora Kelly, once a 12-year-old girl robbed of both time and childhood. She returned to the world with a mind still tender but eyes that had seen too much. She can't reclaim the years she lost, but she can create something from their ashes. Nora's paintings don't speak directly, but each stroke whispers, I was there. I am still here. And there is Maya Ellison, a woman who once carried two names, one assigned by the Bridedau system, and one she chose to reclaim herself. For years, Maya didn't need anyone to call her a blank hero. But to the children sitting in her small workshop, writing out their fears, reading their first truths aloud, Maya was the one who flipped the first switch, letting light seep back into it too. Memory's darkest corners. Then there is Lana Whitaker, not taken, not renamed, but unable to turn away. For nearly 40 years, she lived with the question, why was I the one who stayed? Now, she knows the answer. Because she was the one who had to remember for those forced to forget. She didn't just reopen a case. She reopened the door for an entire generation that had been erased. So they, wherever they lived, whatever name they bore, might still find a way back to their true selves. The story of Morning Lake 15 doesn't end with a conviction or a dramatic arrest. It ends with a restored list of names, a candle lit at a memorial, and a quiet truth that cannot be denied. Not every missing child is dead. Some of them were transformed, reprogrammed, stripped of names, memories, even of themselves. But they're still here, in small towns, schools, offices, and bookstores, living new lives, carrying scars no one can see. And the world must never forget them. Because if forgetting is the weapon of the cruel, then remembering is an act of grace. The lesson isn't in what was lost. It's in how we treat memory, ours and others. If you see someone silent, with vacant eyes, confused when they hear an old name, to be gentle. They might be a child once forced to forget. If you hear someone retelling the same old story, again and again, as if afraid it might vanish, listen. They might be the only one who still remembers. And if you are a survivor, in any form, know that your existence is living proof against those who once tried to erase you. Memory is a light. And as long as someone tends the flame, none of us, not those renamed, hidden, or forgotten, will ever truly disappear. Lana once lived her whole life feeling guilty for being the one who stayed. Since the day 15 classmates vanished at Morning Lake, she carried the unanswerable question, why not me? But now, she understands. Staying wasn't escape, it was a quiet form of resistance. She couldn't descend into the tunnels like Cassia, couldn't guard her memories like Kimmy, or turn pain into art like Nora. But she could remember. For all of them. And because of her, the world now knows. Some children were never buried because they never truly died. So if you meet someone quiet, whose eyes go distant at the sound of a strange yet familiar name, be kind. They may be someone who was once forced to forget who they were. If someone keeps telling an old story, one the world has long moved on from, listen. They may be trying to hold on to the last part of themselves anyone ever believed in. And if you remember a name, even just one, that was once erased, say it aloud, because memory is a light, and as long as someone keeps the flame, none of us will ever truly disappear. The file titled The Morning Lake 15 won't close like a case. It will live on as a reminder that life isn't measured only in breath, but in memory, and that light will always find its way if someone, somewhere, leaves a lamp burning.